device.
Maybe it is.
Recording us.
It's bugged.
We always knew that.
Yeah.
In the year. July 10th public hearing will come to order. The reason for this public order is considering a JED between Amherst Township and the city of Amherst. I'll open this for questions. If you have any questions on any of the JED, refer to the page number that you have a question on. That'll help everybody out. Mr. Mayor, would you like to address this?
This has been on public display in the clerk's office. We advertised it that it was. The township has had their public hearing from what I understand, and it's going to be good for both of us. We'll be able to share our infrastructure and our utilities, and we'll split the income tax that it develops with the economic development that should take place.
Mr. Winarski.
I got a couple questions because I'm new to this JED thing. So can you just give me a summary of what a JED is? And
It's a joint economic district, and it's for cities and townships can work together. Typically, a township don't have the infrastructure, the wastewater treatment. It helps economically develop an area by allowing the city to participate by giving services, and then the people that or businesses that would come to a JED would pay income tax, and according to the agreement, you would split that with the township, and this agreement splits it 50-50. So they would get 50% of the income tax generated. And this does not affect residents. Even if a resident was within the district, they would have to sign a petition allowed to become in the district, but this particular JED, solely by living in a joint economic district, does not affect them.
okay.
Maybe with receiving utilities, maybe a lesser utility rate, but they won't have to pay income tax, only the businesses.
Okay.
I mean, is that?
So that's a great
general
overview.
enough?
That's more than I knew coming
Okay.
into this, but I did have some questions.
So it's a great
beyond that.
tool for cities and townships to use.
Okay. You'd mentioned income taxes, and that was one of my questions. I'm pretty sure, excuse me, townships aren't in the business typically of collecting income tax. In this case, they usually just get what property taxes, assessments, levies, and bond issues, if I'm not mistaken. So this would create, we'd get 50% of the income tax generated within, what do you got here, 35 acres?
Yes,
Okay, and they get the other 50%?
yes.
Now, from reading this, everything else goes to the county though, or I'm sorry, the township, the property tax and stuff
Yes,
that goes.
because they'll still provide police protection, they'll still provide, everything else stays the same. The fire protection that they have with the city,
Okay.
they would continue to contract with the city to provide that. They would still take care of the streets out there. I mean, this would affect utilities and the income tax is all. So they would continue to provide whatever service they normally provide and collect whatever revenue they do for that.
Okay, and that's one of my questions. Do we know what's going in here? And the reason I'm asking that, if we're collecting 50% income tax and it's just a farm or whatever, I mean, that's little fire, little police. But if you're putting up a couple targets, you know, that require a lot of police attention, you know, with the shoplifting and all this garbage that's going on. Do we know what's going in there yet, that we're comfortable that the 50-50 split will cover our expenses?
And again, they'll continue to provide the police protection. It'll still be by sheriff.
Oh, okay.
We won't do that. I
But
mean,
we do cover mutual aid for fire
and we
and
would no
police.
matter what was there. And this is hopefully just the start of it. This is this one piece of property, and hopefully when we find out that this works well, maybe we'll find other areas that might be great for economic development and partner with some more properties, I hope.
Okay. Now here's my level of really demonstrating how little I understand. Went to the, not Stewart, but anyhow, I went to the county auditor's website, and I see we're entering into an agreement with the township, but this land is owned by the Port Authority and the county commissioners. How does that work?
They can own property just like anybody else. It's a Golden Acres property, so the county owns that land. So they're treated just like any other landowner. So they'll have to, when it comes time, the county will have to sign the petition to be part of this, and they're the only owners, so they're the only ones that will have to sign that petition. So they're treated just like any other landowner as far as we're concerned. I'm sure they'll have to jump through the hoops that they need to jump through because they're a government.
Okay.
But
You have to dumb it down a little bit more for me, because this is owned by the county, but we're entering into an agreement with township. Two
But
separate
the township,
entities.
just like any other business or us owning the park, the county owns property within the township. They own that land. They're the owners of record. But it's in the township, so we have to form the agreement with the township, because the township's the governing body of that land. The county just happens to own it.
Okay,
Is that better?
yes,
Okay.
yes it is. It befuddled me, well, lots of things befuddled me. Got a couple more questions, and I'll leave you alone, I promise. Alrighty, 100-year agreement with 2 50-year renewals.
What page are you on, Mr.?
I'm sorry, page 8 of the revised copy.
Okay.
I believe it's letter D, 100-year agreement, 2 50-year renewals. My understanding, that's pretty typical. Any other consideration for shorter term or anything like that?
Nope, I think this is a good long-term commitment. I don't see any reason why you would want to go less.
Okay. Good, okay. Same page, item number G. Grants, the private grants, and I'm going on to the second sentence here, excuse me. Monetary leverage for services within the district, city, township, including infrastructure, elderly assistance, and other people-oriented government assistance. Question I have from that, if we're off, I don't believe township offers elderly assistance, where Amherst does with the Office of the Aging. Are we committing to sharing the Office of the Aging with this?
No,
Jen?
we're just saying that if there's any opportunities for grant monies, we say we're going to work together to get any grant opportunity available.
Okay. Good, okay. Just a couple more questions. All right, I see that there's a board that's formed, and it identifies that there's a president, vice president. This is on page 12 of the revised draft. I was just curious, do the board members, there's up to 5 board members, do they vote amongst themselves, or are they assigned their position within the group?
I think they vote amongst yourself, and there will only be 3 board members to start, because I believe 2 of those are business owners, and there are no business owners yet in that area. So that'll get revised once the business moves in.
Okay. All right, that answers this next question. That answers that question. All righty, we're going on to page 14. And it's approximate, there's no letter associated with it, but approximately 2/3 of the way down. Reading from the left, the board shall designate a resolution of its bylaws, those officers who may sign documents. The following paragraph describes that the township and Amherst each provide 1/1000th of a percent. It comes out to about $3,000 that we're paying, roughly $2,500 a year.
No, we'll be paying 0 because there is no tax revenue yet. I think it's of the revenue that will be taken.
That's the revenue collected in the JED.
Oh,
The
it's
revenue collected
from the
within
JED
just the
area,
JED.
it's not the
Not
city's
city,
budget.
no.
So it's a very small
It's
amount. You're
nothing.
talking stamps and
So
envelopes.
you can't get a
and
cup of coffee for that.
some paper. I mean, it's a very small budget.
Okay. All right. Then my other question, obviously you answered that with regards to now collecting income tax at the township level. The final question I have goes to page 16, it's section 14. There's a requirement here that there be no annexation. Why is that in there? We're not allowed to annex that area anytime.
Only that area. Well, it'd be kind of bad for the township if we get this big JED and then we have this great agreement and a wonderful business moves in there and then they decide to annex. There would be no benefit to the township. That language actually was a lot broader than that. It was kind of no annexing anywhere in the township, and we I think focused on the JED itself. And I think it's a good agreement when you're going to work together and show some good faith to help economically develop the area. You don't want to be stealing business from the township when you work together to bring it. So I think it's just good faith.
My concern isn't stealing businesses. The backyard of this business here is the Amherst School District's land back there.
But we could annex that.
That's all I want to make
It's
sure
only
that
the
we're not
area
locking
within the
ourselves
JED.
out.
It's only the area within the JED. It was broader than this, and we've negotiated down to
Okay.
this.
Limited scope within the JED will not impact
Nowhere
the
else.
school districts or the city's ability to
Absolutely.
annex that land out
That
there.
property was thought of.
Okay. Thank you for entertaining my dumb questions. I appreciate it.
Good question.
End of questions. Thank you.
No questions are dumb.
Just dumb people asking.
Mr. Dembitsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for my own knowledge, do we have other JEDs or other JEDs? This is new to the
This is
city.
new to the city.
All
It's
right.
been talked about in the past, and it's just never been completely followed through, so this will be new to us.
Okay, that's cool. Actually, and that kind of leads into my next question, which is what Mr. Menarski just kind of touched on. If the standard kind of operating procedure before was to do annexation, is there a reason we're doing a JED instead of annexation?
The township don't have to agree with an annexation. This is a good way to partner together. And this is done pretty broadly. I mean, there's communities around us that have JEDs. It's a tool that we just haven't used in the past, and it's win-win for both us and the township.
Was this proposed by us or the township?
It was a mutual agreement, mutual talk brought it forward. We knew this property is going to be a substantial business of some sort sometime, and we could both benefit from this, so work together.
And if I may, Your Honor, or Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor, I think previously that property was targeted for some sort of development without our input whatsoever,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, by the township, so, and that was a number of years ago. So this gives us an opportunity to have some sort of control over the area jointly, versus annexation, which would be more of an adversarial situation where the township may or may not oppose it. If they're going to oppose it, it's going to be adversarial, so.
Township's a great neighbor, and this is just a wonderful way to work together.
It just seems like the city's doing the majority of the heavy lifting and providing services and everything.
Well,
So-
we're not. I mean, honestly, we'll provide utilities, and they'll pay for those utilities. There's a chance for us to make a little extra revenue on utilities, but the township is still providing everything they already provide. So, we're really not stretching our necks out on this at all. We both just have something to gain.
Okay, maybe it's just the way I was reading. It said that, because the city's providing all the income tax collection and like secretarial services and sewer and all the other kind of stuff. I just wanted to make sure that.
They're plowing the streets, they're providing police protection, they're paying for the fire protection. I mean, they're reaching out and doing quite a bit too.
Okay,
So it's pretty even. Thanks.
thank you.
Anyone else?
I
Mr.
want
Rand.
to speak to the tax collection. As it sits right now, there are no residents living in there, so there's no income tax that we would have to collect. But that may change in the future. If and when that changes, we still process returns in our office by hand. So, that may increase the workload.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Sure.
This will never affect the resident. It's only the businesses within the JED. So residents won't pay income tax within a JED. So, I mean, I would have thought about that. I mean, that would have been a whole lot bigger workload, but we won't collect income taxes from residents within the JED.
Okay, so it'll only be the city, or I'm sorry.
The
only
businesses, yes.
Do I see that the tax rate is the same, it mentions it as the cities, but what about the credits and the other provisions of the tax code? Do we need to incorporate
There'll
any
be,
of that?
there'll be a business working within the city, so they're all taxed. All the employees
Well, no,
would
they'd
be
be
taxed.
in the county, or they'd be in the township.
Right, but it would be the same as a business working within the city, so we would withhold everybody that works there. There are no credits because they're a business.
Well, are you sure it's just businesses? It's
Yes,
not?
that was a big part of the
Okay,
conversation.
no residents would be paying
No.
any, we're gonna have to process any residents? Okay.
No.
Right.
Because that would have been a big deal, because we would have had to buy a new module, we would have had to spend some money in order to do that upkeep and stuff, so we did have some concern in that regard, okay.
Nope, I was looking out for your department.
Appreciate it.
And for the residents that might live there.
Mr. Goodell.
Okay, so this income tax is related to the business side of it, but what if they put a residential area in there? How would that?
It's unaffected.
So the residents would still be a township resident,
Yes.
but we would be providing utilities for that?
We do for some areas, but the agreement here is that this will stay zoned for this property isn't zoned residential, so they would have to rezone it, but we would work together to keep this zoned that would best benefit both the city and the township.
Yeah, 'cause I would.
So there would be communication back and forth, and if a residential neighborhood comes in there, we would treat them just like any other residential neighborhood that's already in the township that we're already providing utilities for. We charge at a higher rate for somebody that's not a city resident for utilities.
Well, this probably is a separate question for a different area, but if that were to be a residential area, how would that impact the schools? Is that,
Wouldn't affect the schools, they're still in the school district regardless.
okay. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. One thing I would like to say, you got to remember the township covers us on 3 sides. And this kind of helps for future protection between the township and the city. This is just, I think the mayor will agree, this is probably just the beginning, tip of the iceberg. And I think it behooves us to work along with the township because like I say, they connect with us on 3 sides of our city. So they kind of surround us except for the north. So I think it's a good deal for us all the way around, so.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just kind of echoing off of that, I guess then, if we're only gonna look at JED-type agreements when it makes sense, and we are surrounded on 3 sides by the township and 1 side by Lorraine, we're gonna limit ourselves to say, this is as big as Amherst, and this is all that Amherst is ever going to be.
No.
No.
This is a limited area.
There's a limited area. There are some areas that I would target as an annexation. This is a good opportunity to work together, but there are probably other areas that are probably better to be annexed. So each situation is going to be looked at a little differently.
But
So-
I thought the big plus in this was it's not adversarial to the township.
Just for this particular area, and Mayor indicated that the township was proposing that the city of Amherst never, so long as the contract's in existence, annex property in the township. Well, we can never agree to that. That would be prohibiting our statutory rights. So this is just limited to, I don't know if there's the maps attached or not, but there is an area which indicates where the JED is, and it does not include a vast majority of the township property which joins the city of Amherst.
This only pertains to 1 parcel, basically, or one section
One
of the
little
city.
section.
So
30-some acres.
doesn't
whatever it
pertain to
was.
anything to the west or the south or, so. With that, if there are no more questions, I'll close this meeting at 6:50, 6:52.
Between the lines.
call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 6:53. Roll call vote. Mr. Van Truen.
Here?
Mr. Stembinski.
Here.
Mr. Goodell.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
The chair is present. Mr. Miller and Mr. Janik have a note on file. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to excuse Mr. Miller and Mr. Janik. They have a letter on file.
Okay. Is there a second? Mr. Goodell. There's a motion and a second to excuse Mr. Miller and Mr. Janik from the meeting tonight. They have notes on file. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. They are excused by a vote of 5-0. We have one item on the agenda for tonight. It is A 17-34, reappropriate funds for various accounts in the fire department. Just a procedural note on tonight. Because there are only 5 people present, we will be able to add the emergency clause onto this piece of legislation. But when it goes to council, we're not going to be able to suspend rules and pass it on the first reading. Now, Mr. Auditor, would you care to talk about this this agenda request and give us an idea of how urgent this is?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see by my write-up, the reappropriations is needed for some additional training, payroll, and contract and professional services account. And so what we're doing is we're just reappropriating within that fund from different areas to fill those. If we could put the suspension on there, I know it won't pass tonight, but we'll have to wait till the second one. Hopefully Mr. Janik will be here.
In other words, you can wait 2
We can
weeks.
wait 2 more
You can wait
weeks,
2
yeah.
weeks. So we'll suspend the rules at that meeting.
Right.
But we will add, you're asking we add the
If
emergency
you could
tonight.
add that tonight,
All
and
right.
we'll just have to sit on it.
All right. Mr. Dembinski,
Move to send to the floor of council with emergency.
okay. Mr. Goodell,
Second.
there is a motion and a second to send A 17-34 to the floor of council with the emergency. Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll take a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried 5-0, and that is all that I have, gentlemen. Mr. Winarski.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Dembinski.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned at 6:57. Thank you.
July 10th regular meeting of Amherst City Council will come to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Van Turen. Mrs. Vasilk.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
Mr. Dembinski.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Janik. Mr. Goodell.
Here.
Ms. Vasil.
I move to excuse Mr. Janik and Mr. Miller. They have letters on file.
Thank you. Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to excuse Mr. Miller and Mr. Janik from tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? They are excused. We'll stand for the prayer by Chaplain Vasilk and remain standing for the pledge of the flag by Sergeant at Arms Dembinski.
Will you bow with me, please? Gracious God, bless this meeting tonight. Guide us, inspire us, and bless us all, and accept our gratitude for the beauty of this glorious evening. And now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held June 26, 2017. Minutes of the public hearing held June 26, 2017. Minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held July 10, 2017.
Mr. Van Kuren.
Move to accept the consent agenda as read.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the consent agenda as read. Are there any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell.
Yes.
Motion carries. That completes item 4. Move on to item 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on tonight's agenda. Anyone wishing to speak on anything that is on tonight's agenda? None. I'd like to recognize the government student that came here tonight to sit in on our meeting. Thank you for coming. Move on to item 6, ordinances and resolutions. First reading, item A.
An ordinance reappropriating funds in various accounts and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Goodell.
I'd like to make a motion to take item 6A to the second reading with the emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to take item A onto the second reading with the emergency. Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell.
Yes.
Motion carries. That completes item 6. Move on to item 7, ordinances and resolutions. Second reading, we have none. Move on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions. Third reading. Item A.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 919.
Mr. Goodell.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt item 8A.
Thank you. Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt item A as an ordinance. Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
It'll be ordinance 01726.
Item B.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Part 13, Building Code, Title I, Standards, establishing new standards by adopting a new chapter 1301 and by amendments to chapters 1303, 1305, 1307, 1309, 1311, 1313, and 1315.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
It'll be ordinance 01727.
Item C.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 903.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Winarski?
I'll second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Motion carries.
There will be ordinance 01728.
Item D,
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinance Chapters 1331, 1336, and 1337.
Mr. Van Kuren.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Dembinski?
I'll second that.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It'll be ordinance 01729.
Completes item 8. Move on to item 9, miscellaneous acknowledgement of the public. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item? If not, move on to item 10. Let's see. Agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
To finance A 1735, capital asset policy, it has been recommended by our auditors to create a capital asset policy for the city of Amherst. And there's an attached policy detailing all the information. To streets, A 1736, revision of Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 91304, surcharge rates. To ordinance, A 1737, authorization approving a contract to create a joint economic development district with Amherst Township. And to ordinance A 1738, add section to Amherst Codified Ordinances pertaining to food and vendor carts and trucks. And that's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Finance, Ms. Basil?
Yes, I have one item, A17-35, pertaining to capital asset policy. I'd like to call that meeting for 7 o'clock next Monday.
Thank you. Streets, Mr. Dembinski.
Yes, Mr. President, I have one item, A-17-36, a revision to 913-04. I'd like to call that for next Monday at 7:10.
Thank you. No one from ordinance is here. Would you read those two items off, Ms. Secretary?
Yes, those are A 1737, authorization approving a contract to create a joint economic development district with Amherst Township. And then A 1738 was to add a section to Amherst Codified Ordinances pertaining to food and vendor carts and trucks.
Thank you. We'll have that for 7:15. And that completes agenda requests. Move on to item 11, reports administration.
Thank you. Mr. Kukuka?
Thank you. The June monthly reports have been distributed and report.
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
Our June monthly reports have been distributed as well, and two other things. I have completed the annual maintenance training every year. I'm supposed to do some training to make sure that we can continue with our investments and so forth. And in addition, I've taken a course on commercial paper, which what that allows us to do is now the city can invest in commercial paper. It gives us another avenue if we choose to invest that way. Basically, these kinds of decisions are pretty much come from recommendations from the company that we use for our investments. But now, with that, we have the ability for them to do additional investments for us. And I don't have to take that class again, it's just a one-time thing. Once I've done it, I'm good. So long as I'm here, you all are okay. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Mr. Pecora?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Couple quick things. Our rate consultant, Mr. Courtney, will be here the first committee meeting in September. Talk about our electric rates. We're probably going to need to make some adjustments. He's going to have some ideas on our kilowatt tax. So he's going to have quite lengthy discussion to fill us in what's going to happen with our electric department and our rates. And we have completed looking at all the sidewalks in the city, so pretty good timing with passing 903 or changing that. That's going to help out with this process a lot. So probably be sending out groups of letters not all at once. We'll probably set up a website, an email address where people can ask questions. So we're going to make this as informative as possible, so by the end of the month, hopefully start rolling out some of that plan. Nothing else, so end of report. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
So do you want to make a motion? Mr. Dembinski?
Move to accept the reports of the administration.
Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the reports of administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, reports are accepted. Move on to item 12, acknowledgement of the receipt of monthly reports from both the treasurer and the auditor. I'd like to take a roll call vote on that. Oh, yes. Ms. Purcell. Mr. Dembinski?
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
That's completed. Item 13. Mr. Winarski?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We're adjourned at 7:16.
Although you just had ordinance -20.